powered by Riverside.
Hello and welcome, everybody. It is Captain Boring on what is a Wednesday evening, but a Friday morning by the time y'all listen to this. And for those of you watching online, you will notice there is a void of someone here, much like Jason Derulo. I'm riding solo today. Last week it was Simeon and Roberto, CFP insider Roberto. They held down the fort. Today it is just me. I am riding solo. I'm going to bring you the best episode I can. T's and P's out to Fancy Trash Can. He started a new job this week, so he's rightfully so feeling just a tad overwhelmed by all of that. So I hope that this flows very smoothly here. We got a lot to cover, a lot to go over. The week that it was a wonderful week, but I want to start on a little more somber note here. First and foremost, our thoughts and prayers go out to the families and players of the University of Virginia football team. If you don't know what will be by the time you listen to this, earlier this week, a ex-football player took a gun and shot and killed 3 University of Virginia football players, injured 2 more. Last I read, 1 was in stable condition and the other one was critical. It is a sad time right now to be living in the world, no matter where you are. The only thing that can combat this sadness is a couple things, in my personal opinion. Your faith, your family, and your friends. And you need to have all 3 strong bonds there. 3 sides of a triangle will keep you sane in what is becoming a more progressively sad world. Doesn't mean there aren't happy things in this world, but it is, unfortunately, every time you look around the corner, it's just another sad coming. So, for those of you, strengthen your faith, strengthen the relationships in your family, and strengthen the relationship with your close friends who you might consider your family but aren't related to you. So that is my personal opinion, what people should do. Do what you want and feel how you want and grieve how you want. For those, I can't even imagine the families in Virginia. You entrusted those kids to a football program. I'm not saying the University of Virginia football program let anyone down. They did the quite opposite, I'm sure. But a tough time. So Virginia has canceled their final home game against Coastal Carolina. They were 3-7, so they weren't in any position to make a bowl game. However, this does kind of hurt Coastal Carolina a little bit as their bid to be the top non-Power 5 ranked team to try to get a New Year's 6 game as that quest kind of continues. So we start with that somber note. And again, so I'm just going to pause here for a brief second, say a quick prayer for the families of the Virginia football players. Alrighty. Now, with that aside, and those somber notes aside, we can move on to what was a very entertaining on multiple levels Week 11. First and foremost, I went 3-2. If you do not follow us on Instagram, go to Instagram at 4th and 1 Podcast. Follow us. Every Saturday, I give you updates of what's happening throughout the day. It's very entertaining, I think. It keeps you in the loop. You know what's happening, and I give you just quick flash opinions on everything. So go follow that first and foremost. I did make my picks on there, and I gave them last week. I am 29-24 overall. My goal is to grow that 500 mark just a tad bit over these last 2-3 weeks. And we're going to, so I can say I made you a lot of money over the course of this college football season. But let's jump into last week. What happened? You might be asking yourself, what happened, Makai? Well, let's start in the noon o'clock window. LSU went to Arkansas. By the way, it snowed in Arkansas. First and foremost, the grounds crew in Arkansas need to learn that when you spray water on a field to melt the snow, and then it dips below freezing, that water is going to turn to ice. That's exactly what happened. So then they had to spend the morning scraping the field of all the ice and snow. So great job there, guys. LSU clearly had a post-Alabama hangover and kind of stumbled and mumbled their way through the game. If KJ Jefferson, the Arkansas starting quarterback, had played on Saturday, it is my belief that LSU would have gone down. They did not. They won the game. And then, again, in a tough fought, Arkansas turned the ball over 3 or 4 times. So, with what ended up being their third string quarterback. So LSU survives, and that's really all you got to do in this college football world. Survive, advance. They were not penalized from the committee's point of view, and I will give you the standings here in just 1 second. They were not hurt by that because of the post-Alabama hangover. Now, what they needed to do to win as I am trying to look for, I cannot find the top 25 currently, but that's all right. Oh, here you go. What they needed to do to win the SEC West was have Alabama beat Ole Miss, and Alabama battled back from a 14-point deficit at one point in Oxford to beat Ole Miss. So Lane Kiffin still has not beaten his mentee in Nick Saban. And really, the note that I have on this game is Bama bounces back, which they finally looked right. Now, Bryce Young probably has done one of the best job. There really is a lack of running game. There's no number one receiver on the outside. He should be top 3 in the Heisman, in my opinion, with what he's doing with this. He made play after play after play to put them in the position to win the game on Saturday against Ole Miss, and that's what they did. But this is more of a criticism of Ole Miss, and I want to take this time to criticize Ole Miss because your play calling at the end of the game was...
because it's garbage.
It was complete and utter trash. What worked for Ole Miss all game was handing it to the running back and letting that offensive line and running back work Alabama over. And it worked and it worked and it worked. What didn't work was the quarterback draw. For those of you who don't know what a quarterback draw is, that is when in the shotgun quarterback takes it and then looks like he's going to pass, but immediately takes off. It was a run all the way. It was always going to be a run. And so it's called a quarterback draw. Sometimes they run it with the running back. Sometimes they run it. But what wasn't working for Ole Miss was the quarterback draw game. So Alabama goes down and scores. And now they are up. What happened was Alabama got a field goal. Ole Miss turned the ball over. Then Alabama got another field goal. 6-point game. Ole Miss can go down and score a touchdown, win the game. Their running back rips off a big 50-yard run, then another yard run. They ran all the way down from their 25 down to Alabama's 10-yard line. And then what do? They try to throw the ball. This is first and goal with two timeouts, I believe, or at least one timeout with about a minute 15 on the clock. What do they try to do? Throw the ball. Then they try to throw it again. Then they try the quarterback draw. Not once did they try to hand the ball off to their running back late in that game in that. When you have something that is working, why on earth will you go away from it? Today, me and Roberto were talking at work that it's almost annoying because Michigan has averages like 7 yards a carry that they just keep running the football, no matter down in distance, no matter if it's 3rd and 8, 3rd and 6, whatever. They just run the football, run, because they think that they can at any point rip off a 10-yard gain. And for the most part of the season, they've been able to on any down in distance at any point of the football game. When you have something that's working, why on earth would you go away from it? The quarterback draw game was not working the entire game. I was watching 2 games at once, the Michigan game and then the Alabama game. Every time I looked down at the Alabama game, which was on my laptop in front of my face, and they ran the quarterback draw, it did not work. So I don't know why they kept going back to it. Alabama was clearly coached on it well. They was coached up well. So Alabama survives. They have now 2 losses. LSU wins the West. Georgia wins the East, as they did then later that night by beating Mississippi State. So it will be LSU and Georgia for the SEC title game. Ole Miss could have been in this thing and could have stay and hoped for a kind of last week miracle to get in if they would have just run the ball, because Alabama really did not stop them all game long. Now, talking about the rankings and some scenarios I just want to get into here. So the college football playoff rankings came out last night when I'm recording. This is Tuesday night. So most of you probably already know this, but if not, here they are. Top five really actually stay unchanged. It's Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, TCU, Tennessee. LSU moves up one. USC moves up. Alabama, Clemson, Utah round out the top 10. Who you may have noticed is they're lacking, that was there last week, is Oregon. Well, what happened to Oregon? Well, their secondary and their corners and their safety finally got exposed by the nation's leading passer in Michael Penix. It finally bit them in the butt, and they lost to Washington at home. They had the nation's longest home winning streak, I believe, and they lost to Oregon, and I can't believe I did not make a note of this at all. Yes, I don't know why I didn't make that note, but yes, Oregon lost at home to Washington, and again, it was their secondary. So now, in order for the Pac-12 to make the college football playoff, they are banking on either USC or Utah sitting there at 10 with some help. And if you're USC, you have a tough game this weekend against UCLA, and then you have to play a Notre Dame team in the final week of the season that isn't terrible, and their defense is pretty good, and your defense is pretty bad. Meanwhile, Utah's a 2-loss team. LSU's a 2-loss team. One of those teams are vying to be the first two-loss team in the college football playoff. LSU clearly sitting at 6 has the better chance of it currently, because if they beat Georgia in the SEC title game, they'll have wins over Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgia. They would clearly be in. If you are Michigan or Tennessee fans, you need TCU to win out. You absolutely need Georgia and TCU to win out, and then you're going to fight over that last spot. Why do I say Michigan and Tennessee? Because I believe, and we will do this next week as a preview of the final week, that Michigan's going to lose to Ohio State probably in a close game. I believe that both those teams are on the same playing field, and Michigan has finally caught up with not only recruiting, but with their own kind of play style and explosive play style, and their defense is good enough that this will be a close game. So, with that being said, Tennessee and Michigan, who will then both be non-conference champions, assuming the Pac-12 champion has 2 losses, Georgia wins the SEC, and TCU wins out, both of them have a legitimate shot. Michigan's looked dominant all years long, but their strength of schedule and out-of-conference schedule sucks. Tennessee looked really good and can put up a lot of points. Problem is their defense sucks, and then when they faced a real team, that really sucked. The only time Michigan faced a real team, which was at home against number 11 Penn State, they shellacked them. Shellacked. It's a great word. So, a lot of hopes. Now, if TCU loses, let's say in the Big Ten title game to number 15 Kansas State, right? Georgia wins out. Ohio State wins out. So now you're looking for 2 spots. Now I think Michigan, you have and assuming Pac-12 champion has 2 losses. Clemson would be interesting, a possible 1-loss ACC champion, but the problem is their only loss is probably the most terrible. Again, assuming Michigan, their close loss would be to an unranked Notre Dame team on the road, and it wasn't even close. At least Tennessee hung around with Georgia, but again, on the road, so that would be very interesting. I think in those 2 scenarios where TCU wins out, Michigan loses a close game, I think Tennessee would get in. I think Michigan needs TCU to lose, Pac-12 champ to have 2 losses, and then I think Michigan would get in over Clemson, TCU. So Michigan then would be 4, Georgia would be the top dog, and we would get a rematch of last year's semifinal game where Georgia just blew the brakes off Michigan, and that's what the Michigan players want. They want Georgia. They want Georgia again. They want to try Donovan Edwards, Blake Corum, J.J. McCarthy. AJ Henning, they want Georgia again, and that would set up this rematch. Now, I don't think it's going to go well because Georgia, in my mind, is the best team in the country. They have surpassed Ohio State as the best team in the country. They are clearly, according to the committee, and I, for once, actually agree with them. Georgia's probably going to go back-to-back. The only team equipped to stop them is a high-flying offense with a pretty good defense, and that would be Ohio State. Tennessee, you run that back again, it's probably going to be the exact same result, my guess is. TCU, unfortunately, their defense is good, and while they did shut Texas down on the road, their own offense kind of sputtered against a good Texas defense, so that probably won't end well. Michigan, I feel, would give them a closer game just because it's the revenge factor, but Michigan's inability to throw the deep ball is evident. They have to continue throwing the deep ball. They tried 5 or 6 times again against Nebraska, did not hit them, and it just looks out of sync, and it doesn't look like the quarterback and the wide receiver they don't know what they're doing. They're not on the same page. JJ, on the very deep balls, he throws it at an angle, and I'm going to try to get it straight on. He throws it at this angle here, right? He throws it on almost not a line drive, but he throws it with zip on a low trajectory. He needs to elevate that and get it above his eyes and throw it with more air under the football so that when it comes down, the nose of the football is now kind of pointing down and not pointing straight like it has been. And for those of you watching on YouTube or wherever else you get your podcast, you kind of can see what I'm talking about here. So JJ McCarthy really got to link up, and I do think because Blake Corum's great, that offensive line great, it's probably the best overall running game I've seen in quite some time, where you know what they're going to do, you load 8 in the box and they still get 6 yards a carry. But Michigan must continue to find a deep ball, and until they do, I think it will be almost the exact same outcome as last year, possibly a little closer, maybe like a 35-20 type game where it's kind of close for a little bit there. Maybe Michigan keeps it in one score and then Georgia scores a late touchdown. Ohio State's defense is much improved, as I have touched on in the past, and their offense, especially if they get Jackson Smith-Njigba back at some point this season, even without him, they have Emeka Egbuka, Marvin Harrison Jr., and if they get Smith-Njigba back, they can go toe-to-toe with Ohio State. However, Travion Henderson and Myron Williams, their 2 running backs, are both hurt. And that offensive line is not made to dominate in the running game, and that's what you have to do to beat these SEC teams. You have to be able to dominate in the trenches, both on offense and defense. So, That I think is what will happen come playoff time. Now we got 2 weeks to go. Michigan could lose this week to Illinois. They could lose this week and win next week at Ohio State. Ohio State could stumble and allow a ton of yardage and a ton of points to Maryland. They could beat Michigan and then lose in the title game. They could win out. So there's a lot of possibilities. TCU's not off the hook yet. They got to go on the road with a tough Baylor team. So no one's off the hook yet. The only championship games set at this point are the SEC and the ACC. The ACC will be Clemson and North Carolina. North Carolina staved off Wake Forest's run, and so they will meet Clemson in the ACC title game. And let's remember what Wake Forest did to Clemson in their close loss. They threw the ball deep. Well, the ACC's best quarterback plays in Chapel Hill, and his name is Drake May, and Roberto wants him to be on the Heisman final list, and I can't say I disagree with him at all. So, again, very interesting matchups, even come championship weekend. But this week it means a lot to everyone in terms of the college football playoff path. You need to win. But in terms of winning your conference championship, 2 major conferences this week really does not matter at all. I want to go back to Texas and TCU. Quinn Ewers was the problem. He was missing wide open receivers, and then when he was hitting them, they were dropping them because they weren't in advantageous places where the receivers can catch and run. He had a seam route right down the middle of the field. He hit it, but it was kind of behind and low. And kind of picture if you're running forward, he hit him right in the groin, like right in the cup where the guy's cup would be. That's a hard catch when you're running full speed forward to do. Receiver definitely should have caught it, but didn't. Another one, he had a crossing pattern, so that's where the receiver crosses right in front of your face. Again, catchable, but it was on the back shoulder, and so that's kind of hard to catch. That needs to be out in front so the receiver can catch and run. Quinn Ewers really has not looked right, in my opinion, throwing the ball since the Alabama game where he landed hard on that shoulder. I'm not saying Quinn Ewers won't be a good quarterback. He has all the makings of being a good quarterback because then late in the game, he made some throws that made you go, wow, that is impressive. Texas's defense did everything they do. They kept a high-flying TCU offense to 17 points. TCU's defense was much maligned up until this point. And they held a Texas offense, specifically a good Heisman-level running back in Bijan Robinson, or the Heisman ability running back in Bijan Robinson, to 3 points. They got a late fumble recovery for a touchdown. Now, why it was a 7-point win. But that's what you got to do. You got to survive and advance. Some happy news, and I think Simeon would really, and I kind of miss that he's here because he would really do this. But I'm trying to find a sound bite, but I really don't got one. So, but here we go. I'm gonna play this for Vanderbilt and UConn, everybody.
Well, Dick, here's the deal. I'm the best there is, plain and simple. I mean, I wake up in the morning, I piss excellence.
They can wake up in the morning and say they piss excellence because Vanderbilt snaps a 26-game conference losing streak, anchored down, baby. So Vanderbilt beat Kentucky, came back on the road and beat Kentucky. So kudos to Vanderbilt. UConn, everybody, they, 1 year after being the worst team in the FBS, or one of the worst teams, they get bowl eligible, everyone, by beating Liberty at home. Just absolutely.
Hi, I'm Paul.
I don't know why I played that. I just feel like it. So they get bowl eligible. That's excellent. UConn, an independent team. Jim Moore doing great things there up in the Northeast. And they get bowl eligible. So Vanderbilt snaps their 26-game SEC losing streak, which means they haven't beaten an SEC team since 2019, for those of you who don't know. And UConn gets bowl eligible. They are currently, I believe, they're 6-5. So good old UConn. And I want to finish with this before we kind of get in, or maybe I'll get into something else because I just realized I'm only 23 minutes in. If you're going to have targeting a penalty, okay? If you're going to have targeting a penalty, and for those of you who don't know what targeting is, that is, now they've kind of changed the language of the rule over the years, but targeting is when you make forcible contact to the head or neck area of a defenseless player, or you lead with the crown of your helmet. Crown of your helmet is basically the very top of your head, okay? The very, very top, okay, of your head. So if you lead with the crown of your helmet at any point, you can be thrown out of the game. If you make forcible, and that's the key, forcible contact to the head or neck area, oh my goodness, excuse me, I hope everyone got that. I just let out 2 massive burps. Forcible contact to the head or neck area, that is also targeting of a defenseless player. You can be thrown out of the game. Okay? I'm all good with that because, one, it teaches you to tackle with your head up. As someone who has never played the game of football, besides backyard football, tackle football in pads, you can say you don't know what you're talking about. But I do know that if you put your head down like this, right? I am an orthopedic nurse, okay? And I am a nurse, and I know how the body works, right? So for those of you watching on YouTube, hi. Sorry, you got to look at my face, and sorry Simeon isn't here, or Roberto, again, riding solo. So if you do this and put your head down like this, and then run into someone at 10 miles an hour, you're probably going to crush these vertebrae right here in your neck. And if you do that, you're probably never going to walk again. Okay, so that's why that rule is in there. It is player safety. They do not want me running in, and you can't see this pole because it's right off camera. There's a pole. I have a pole in my basement holding up my ceiling. Okay, it's supposed to be there. It's holding up the beam in the ceiling. If I run full force with my head down, I'm gonna crush the vertebrae in my neck. I'm never gonna walk again. Then my wife's gonna have to bathe me and wash me and change my diapers. But if I'm looking straight at this pole and I run face first into this pole, I'm going to break my nose. I'm going to knock out a few teeth. Probably going to break my orbital bone, whatever, But I'm more than likely not going to die. Okay? I'm not saying football players are going to die, right? And they have pads on. We can get into concussions and CTE at a far, far later time. But the rule is implemented to protect the players, leading with the crown and the helmet. Forcible contact, that is to protect the tackler. Forcible contact to the head or neck area of a defensive player is to protect the guy carrying the football. So this is kind of this language, the forcible contact first is the thing that has been changed most recently because they used to be called any contact to the head or neck area the person got thrown out of the game. Now it's forcible. The other thing is it has to be of a defensive player. So I'm talking out of bounds, player run out of bounds, a player getting tackled and a hit coming in late. That's the one that you probably see most. The quarterback sliding, that's the second one. So a quarterback slides, someone already kind of took off and launched and hit them in their head or neck, but they faced up. That would be a defenseless player. All of these are defenseless, and all of these are targeting. I agree with you should get thrown out because it's player safety. But if player safety is first and foremost what you're looking at, if you implemented this rule for player safety so that they learn how to tackle and they don't tackle late and they don't hit, in the moneymaker, okay? Then you have to, when someone grabs a face mask and rips it so hard that the helmet flies off their head, you have to also throw that player out of the game. Because I'll tell you what, that is almost as dangerous as leading with the crown and the helmet. When a player is running one way and a defender gets juked down and reaches out and grabs a hold of the face mask and pulls, that his neck is going to snap back the other way like this. And so if my body's going this way, and my head snaps back that way, well, that can also lead to a broken neck. What I'm referring to the play in the Alabama Ole Miss game where Dallas Turner, defensive end, great defensive end for Alabama. He did not do it on purpose. I want to lead with that. Again, it was a quarterback draw that didn't end up working, but what happens was he did fake Dallas Turner out, the quarterback for Ole Miss did, and Dallas Turner grabbed the face mask, and that's the only thing that he could grab on, so he pulled. Again, it was a reaction split-second thing. Snapped it. It looked violent, snapped it. Helmet came off. Now, Dallas Turner was like, oh my goodness, kind of stood over the quarterback, like, are you okay? All the defensive linemen for Alabama offense, everyone was like, are you okay? Crowd got really quiet. He ended up staying in the game. No harm, no foul there. Jackson Dart is the quarterback's name, just came to me. But you have to throw Dallas Turner out of the game for that. In my personal opinion, if you're going to yank now, face masks are incidental. They are, but so is targeting. So is targeting for the most part. You can't tell me that players running 15 miles an hour have to make a split second decision that every time it's not. Now, sometimes you can clearly tell when the defender went in there for bad intentions, and most of the time it's a safety on a quarterback that is sliding. He's going to go light that quarterback up no matter what. Hits him, gets thrown out of the game. Again. But for the most part, targeting's a bang-bang, incidental kind of play. So are face masks. Now, I'm not talking about the face masks where it just kind of rips to the side that are called a penalty. By the way, the penalty on Dallas Turner was called. Ole Miss ended up scoring a touchdown to go up 7. Then Alabama answered, and then answered 2 more times with field goals. I'm not talking about face masks where it's just a kind of, again, still dangerous, kind of just pulls to the side. He accidentally grabs it, kind of pulls down. I'm talking about the plays, and you see it from time to time. I probably see it 6 or 7 times in a given season where you rip a face mask, you grab a face mask, you rip it off, and the helmet comes off. I'm sorry. You rip at the face mask, and the helmet comes off. You got to throw the player out of the game for that. If you're going to throw players out for targeting to protect players, you have to throw them out when the helmet comes off if you're ripping at the face mask. It's only fair. And I don't want to see players get thrown out for targeting, and I don't want to see players get thrown out for ripping someone's helmet off, and incidentally. But it has to be done, because if you're saying that that targeting is for player safety, both the tackler and the tacklee, then the face mask penalty, where the helmet comes off because it is that violent, you also have to throw that kid out of the game. In my personal opinion, if you're saying one is for safety, then this also has to be for safety, because this is at a risk, is at just of a big risk as leading with the crown of the helmet. You can snap and break the neck, break the vertebrae in your neck, puncture the spinal cord, and now guess what? Now that kid is not breathing. I mean, same with targeting, leading with crown. Now that kid isn't breathing because you're on your spinal cord. A little nursing knowledge for everyone that no one needed to know about. And I know this podcast is taking a somber turn. I'm talking about, people getting paralyzed. But about C4 is where on the spinal cord is where your body, your autonomic breathing kicks in. You take out C4 or anything above, that kid is no longer breathing on the sideline. That young man is no longer breathing on the field. So I'm saying if leading with the crown of the helmet gets you thrown out of the game, then ripping someone's helmet off incidentally by grabbing the face mask and snapping their neck. Either way, you are pulling hard, jerking it up, jerking it down, jerking it side to side. I mean, I just put a crink in my neck looking up like that in a quick manner. You gotta throw that kid out of the game, unfortunately. Okay? That's just my suggestion. No one's gonna like the suggestion. And I never said you had to. But that's just my suggestion. If one's for player safety, the other also should be for player safety. Okay. So, moving on. What do I got here for you guys? Well, so I did go through the top 10 of the college football playoff ranking. As the rankings kind of dwindle down to kind of the final rankings of the season, I develop less and less problems with them because they don't change from time to time. What does happen is, unfortunately, is the committee sets it up so that in their first playoff ranking, they set it up so that the end of the year, the teams at the end of the year that need those crucial wins the most have the crucial wins against high-ranked teams, even though some of the high-ranked teams. Now, in this case, LSU, who was at 10, deserved it. They're at 6, and they control their own destiny. I believe LSU wins the SEC title game. They will go from 6 to 4. At the very minimum, they will go from 6 to 4 and make the college football playoff. That would be bad news for the loser of the Ohio State-Michigan game. I think that's bad news because Georgia's getting in no matter what. No matter what, Georgia's getting in. Unless if they lose this week to Kentucky, which they're not going to do, and the SEC title game, or if they lose this week and then the SEC, if they have 2 losses, probably not getting in. However, with one, if their only loss is in that SEC championship game, they're getting in. So Georgia's probably in. The winner of Ohio State, Michigan, even if they lose the Big Ten championship game, I believe that they're in. An undefeated TCU is in. However, TCU is the only top 10 Big Ten team, and they're one of them and Kansas State. Kansas State is 15. So an undefeated TCU gets in. I don't think a one-loss TCU gets in. USC is 1 loss. If they beat UCLA this week and Notre Dame next week and the Pac-12 championship game against what would currently, I believe, be Oregon, assuming Oregon wins out, I think would have enough to get in. So at that point, it would be Georgia, sake of argument, because I'm a pessimist, it would be Ohio State. Well, it would probably be Ohio State would get in, assuming LSU wins. That is the scenario. It would be Ohio State 1. My guess is then at this point, Georgia, it would be USC would probably be 2 with that resume, with that final season. Georgia would be 3 and LSU would be 4. Or you flip-flop and you make LSU 3, so it would be, and then Georgia 4. Let's assume USC loses, because I think they lose one of these games, either in the Pac-12 championship game to UCLA this weekend or even next weekend to Notre Dame, right? So then you have Clemson. Same scenario, right? TCU is out, right? LSU would be in. Clemson wins out. LSU wins out. Georgia, Ohio State obviously are in. And then I think you put Clemson in over Tennessee, although Clemson hasn't been that impressive, and Clemson has not been more impressive than Michigan. So what do you do there? I think it becomes very, very interesting down the stretch. I think the easiest kind of scenario is what I laid out earlier. Michigan, Ohio State play a very close game. TCU loses at some point because I think they're going to. Georgia wins out. And then even I do think that if Clemson, USC, and then TCU wins out but wouldn't have the conference championship game, that's very interesting. And then Michigan would be with that 1 loss. I think that becomes a very interesting argument, because you would have Georgia, Ohio State, and then for those final 2 spots, Michigan, I think, is better than Clemson. USC is better, have a better offensive resume than Michigan, so I would put them in as conference championship, and then it would come down to Michigan and Tennessee. So my guess is that 4 spot, something's going to happen where that 4 spot is going to be open, and it's going to come down to a 1-loss Michigan on close loss in Columbus and a Tennessee team that dominated, except for Georgia, who they would probably play in the semifinal, who they got kind of run off the road, and they scored a late touchdown to make it close. Very interesting scenarios. You stay right here with 4th and 1 podcast for the rest of the season. Go follow us on Instagram at 4th and 1 podcast. North Carolina they're a 1 loss. They can throw a big wrench into this. If they keep winning with a 1 loss, they're sitting at 13 right now. They shellac Clemson in the ACC title game. Their offenses look very good. North Carolina and TCU, very similar teams. And I think North Carolina would be ranked 6-7 if they did not have that 1 loss to Notre Dame. So Notre Dame's resume is looking good, which only helps USC, and there's a lot of different ways we can go with this. But somebody wanted me to preview games outside of my top 5 biggest games this coming weekend, so that's what I will do. So last night, by the time you're hearing this, would be SMU at Tulane, who scored 77-63. Boy, was that awesome. So many yards of offense. And my uncle, I need to do him proud. Yes, I knew that Cumberland beat or Georgia Tech beat Cumberland 222-0 back in 19 something or the other. Okay. Yes, very impressive. And their win was even more impressive with how many points they scored, 222, because teams back then didn't really throw the ball. They mostly just ran. Tulane currently sitting atop, or I think they're third right now, but they control their own destiny. They win out, Tulane. They're in the AAC title game against UCF, assuming UCF wins out. Cincinnati still sitting there, can beat Tulane to clinch their spot. AAC, very interesting. Not going to make the college football playoff this year. No Cincinnati, but very good quality football. Meanwhile, Navy and UCF, Navy triple option, very hard to defend if you're not ready for it. Kickoff 11 a.m. On ESPN2 before game day is even over. The Big Ten West, also very interesting. No team controls their own destiny, meaning that no team that wins out gets to go automatically. They need help. They need another team to lose. I think the easiest path is for Purdue to win out, and then they need an Iowa loss. Iowa could lose to Minnesota this weekend. Oregon State, ranked 23 this year, taking on Arizona State. Not that interesting. Notre Dame, by the way, is ranked 18. I just noticed this right now. That helps USC's case a ton. That helps Clemson's case a ton. A one-loss Clemson team, but say Notre Dame beats USC, messes around a little bit, gets ranked top 15. Clemson's only loss is a big loss on the road to top 15 Notre Dame squad. Helps a little bit. Also hurts you with how much you lost. How NC State is still ranked at this point, I don't know. They're just one of those teams that's just kind of hanging around. Cincinnati's ranked at 25. South Carolina just hot and then cold. They'll win a couple and then they'll lose, and they get number 5 Tennessee at their place on Saturday night. Ole Miss gets Arkansas. That's not a guaranteed win for Ole Miss. At Arkansas, Arkansas plays tough. KJ Jefferson's back. Ole Miss's defense clearly needs some help. Bedlam, which is Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, not nearly as interesting as it was last year or has been. All of Oklahoma's losses have come in conference, so that's not great. Oklahoma State, all 3 of their losses have come in conference. Not good defenses. Both defenses allowing... Oklahoma's allowing 432 yards a game. Oklahoma State's allowing 452 yards per game. Both teams can score a lot, but if you can't stop anybody from scoring, then what good does that do anyone? I will get into some big-time matchups that are coming up that I'm not mentioning. Again, Virginia, Coastal Carolina was canceled this week due to the tragic events that happened there on campus that I covered at the beginning of the show. So again, not a lot of high-profile games. I actually had some trouble trying to find high-profile games that I could tell you all about. But if you're a college football nut like me, again, good Big Ten West games. I mean, you got 5 on that side. I think you have 4 or 5 teams that can still theoretically win the Big Ten West. Purdue leading the way. Illinois right there. Minnesota and Iowa, they play each other this weekend. So it's going to be very interesting kind of down the stretch. Unfortunately, we are coming down the stretch. I wish that college football lasted as long as pro football. And it does in an extent, but when you get into bowl season, what makes college football so great is the games mean something off the jump. You lose week 1, you might be done. Like, how many one-loss teams are there right now? There are 4 remaining unbeaten teams. It's the top 4. Everyone else has 1 loss. Clemson might win their conference and not make the college football playoff because they lost to Notre Dame. Losses in week 1 mean something. Losses in week 6 to a team that you should have beat, that everyone's just like, oh, you had a bad game, you got housed by the refs, they made a call. That means something. In the NFL, the Eagles were 8-0. They just lost the Washington Commanders. 4 turnovers, I think. Okay, we'll get better next week and we'll go back at it. It means something in terms of how you get into the playoffs. 7 teams get into the playoffs now. You got 4 spots here. And so Philadelphia loses 3-4 games this year. Probably still ends up 1 seed or close to it. Makes the playoff, able to make a playoff run. You lose 3 or 4 games in college football, you're not making a New Year's 6 bowl. You're making a bowl game, which is good, but if you're a high-profile Power 5 school, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, Clemson, Notre Dame, you got to make the New Year's 6 to help with elite level recruiting. Texas A&M, the dismal season that they have had, they had the best recruiting class last year, all freshmen. Terrible season. Now again, these freshmen are going to grow up, man up, hit the weight room, sophomores, juniors, and then we'll see what they're made of. But you can't tell me that this abysmal season that Texas A&M have, and no matter how much money you pay these players, means that these recruits aren't going to look elsewhere, especially in Texas with TCU now coming. Listen, I know Texas has 4 losses. They're going to go bowling. It's going to help Sark. Best Texas has looked in a decade. They're going to look at Alabama. They're going to look at Georgia. They're going to look at Tennessee now. So these games are important from the jump. You can't lose 3 games and then expect to compete for national championship because you won't get the level of recruits, first and foremost. Second of all, you won't make the college football playoff. Even when it expands, you have 3 losses. Those 3 losses better be at Alabama by 1 point, at Georgia by 1 point, and then all your other wins have to be dominant. You got to beat a Tennessee. You got to beat a Kentucky on the road, and you got to make them look good if you're going to have 3 losses and make the 12-team format. It's going to be. That's why I love college football. You got to get in there. You got to hit the ground running. In the NFL, yeah, you want to get a nice warm-up going the first 4 weeks. By week 4, you better be running by week 4. By week 4 in college football, if you jog through your non-conference schedule before you hit the big boys of your conference, if you jog through the first 3 weeks, you might be looking at a 1-2 record, and you are done. You aren't relevant again, assuming you win out until week 10. That means recruits aren't looking in your direction nationally on the television for 7 weeks. Meanwhile, Bama's reeling off wins. Georgia's reeling off wins. Ohio State's reeling off wins. Michigan's reeling off wins. Tennessee's reeling off wins. And you're playing a 3:30 game on ESPN2 while Alabama's playing Ole Miss on CBS and Michigan's playing Michigan State on Fox and Ohio State's playing, let's just pretend like the other teams in the East are good, like a Penn State. Penn State actually is good. Penn State on NBC, and Clemson is playing an NC State at night, and TCU's playing an Oklahoma State. They're not looking in your direction for some time. Gone. Goodbye. That's why I love college football. So I will be sad when it's over, but I won't be sad because it's over. I'll be sad because it happened. And I'll be glad because it happened, but sad that it's over. I messed up that line, but here we go. Okay. Week 12, ladies and gentlemen, let's get down to it. The battle for LA. And I got to look up because I didn't update my rankings, so I do apologize for everyone. So I came in hot there, so I'm going to have to restart. I do apologize. It is number 7 USC taking on number 16 UCLA. Two of the best offenses in the country. This is Dorian Thompson-Robinson versus Caleb Williams. Expect fireworks, ladies and gentlemen. Expect little defense, lots of fireworks. This is USC's last push. They can make college football playoff if they beat a number 16 UCLA, a number 18 Notre Dame, and then whoever they get in the conference championship game. By the way, winner of this game locks themselves in more than likely to the Pac-12 championship game. This is whoever has the ball last wins, and I actually think, let's go, bear down. That's the wrong school. UCLA at home, Chip Kelly. Last time USC went on the road, it did not end so well. So this means that it will be the exact opposite of what Makai picks, but I like UCLA to win, pull the upset. That would put them in the driver's seat of the Pac-12, at least to make the conference championship game. I love the set over of 75.5 to hit. I know it's a lot of points, but I think this game is 42-35. Both these teams run the football very well. Both teams throw the football very well. And both these teams do not play a whole lot of D. It's all O, no D. I like UCLA to win. And I like the over. UCLA is also the underdog in this. So if you wanted to take them plus the points, that's more than fine. However, the spread is like 1.5. So, alrighty. Now, number 10 or Utah taking on number 12 Oregon. Everybody, another high-scoring affair in the Pac-12. Again, UCLA, USC. Hi, buddy. This is Duke, everyone. For those of you who don't know, the Duke man, the Duke man. How's your day, buddy? He's had a very stressful day. Lots of strangers in the house. Renovation. He's been high most of the day because he gets stressed. Very itchy. Mom's not home. He's stuck with the spare human that is his father. So his tail got chopped off. So it's not a good day to be the Duke, but it's a great day to be a dog. And it's going to be a great day to be a Utah Ute, ladies and gentlemen. See what I did there. Can Utah control Oregon's passing game, and is Bo Nix healthy? Those are the keys to the game. Or can Utah also control Oregon's running game is what I think I meant, because Oregon's running game is very good. Is Bo Nix healthy to help out that running game? That's the question. Bo Nix at one point was leading the nation in total touchdowns. Bo Nix exited the game against Washington. I really didn't talk about it that whole much, but he exited the game in Washington, and that was whoever had the ball last won. And the problem was that who had the ball last was Oregon, went for it on fourth down in their own territory. Running backs who was dominating all game slipped, fell, gave the ball back to Washington, who scored. And then Oregon, Bo Nix came back in, exited with an ankle injury earlier in the game, came back in, and comeback kind of fell short there late. This is another high-scoring affair, I think. The over-under 61.5, I think that's low. In Utah's biggest games, they have allowed over 30 points in every single game every single big primetime game they would be in. Utah has done the exact same. Into USC and UCLA have allowed numerous amount of points. Oregon can score. Utah can score. Utah can play a little bit of defense, but they're on the road at Oregon. Oregon's going to be pissed off, hungry, but I like the Utah Utes. I told you at the beginning of the year, they would have 2 or 3 losses, and then they just come on strong. They're number 10, and they're going to make a run. And if they beat Oregon, and then if they beat a UCLA or USC, and whoever they have next week, listen, they make a strong argument for a 2-loss team in the college football playoff. That's all I'm saying. Wasn't saying I would agree with a 2-loss team being in, but that's what would happen. So I like Utah over the 61.5. I also like Utah plus 3, so whatever you want to do there, but I'll be taking the over-under there. Illinois coming off back-to-back terrible losses, going to number 3 Michigan. Why is this a big game? I told you, the Big Ten West is up in the air. No one controls their own destiny. Illinois needs to win out. They can even lose to Michigan, then win out, and still find their way in. But if they beat Michigan, that goes a long way. Michigan, do not F this up. Please. This is the type of team that Michigan loses to, a team that likes to run the football, even though without the nation's leading rusher, Chase Brown, and plays really good rush defense against a team in Michigan that has to find their deep ball. This is Michigan's warm-up. You have to find a deep ball against Illinois. Do you look ahead to Ohio State? Is this 2006 all over again? Is this 2016 all over again? And is Michigan's rush defense, which leads the country, by the way, Michigan's defense has all of a sudden is top 3 in every single major statistical category in college football. Is Michigan's run defense actually as good as they say? They're going to be tested on Saturday. The over-under is 42. This is a perfect trap game. Senior day at home. You're looking ahead to Ohio State. You're going on the road. You just got to make it through Illinois. You just got to make it through Illinois. Hi, Illinois. Brett Bielema smiling. I'm going to pound them. We're going to take that rush defense apart. That's what they're thinking. I think this is a low-scoring affair because I do believe in Michigan's defense. Danny DeVito, Chase Brown is hurt, got hurt, could not put any weight on his ankle when he left the game last week against Purdue in a loss. Does Michigan find the deep ball? I think yes. I think Michigan probably wins by 21, ends up winning by 21 because it is senior day at home. But I think it is what they did to Nebraska last week, a 37-3, a 34-7 type of football game. Michigan defense and running game dominate. So you take Michigan and you take under 42.5. Again, I said it was hard to find good games. So I'm going with the game that no one's going to watch because the punters are going to rule and maybe the defense will score some points. That's Iowa at Minnesota, ladies and gentlemen. Again, Big Ten West wide open. This is a huge game for the Big Ten West because if Iowa loses and Purdue wins, Purdue's in. But if Iowa wins and Purdue wins, Purdue still needs Iowa to win. Minnesota can still win with winning out and getting some help and doing some other things. So it's crazy. No one knows what's going on. I don't know what's going on, and I follow the sport closer than most people. So which defense can score more of their offense? Minnesota has the better running game. Iowa's offense actually has improved, but improvement from 0, an improvement from 2 to 0 is still an improvement, but not that much. Last week, Iowa had 140 total yards of offense, and they won the game 24-7. Their defense is legit. Their defense scores points. They have a great punter. They do the right things. The over-under is like 32. The problem is, lately, because Iowa has their offense has improved, the overs have been hitting recently. Minnesota has the better offense. Mohamed Ibrahim, their running back, is one of the best in the country. That running game they're going to rely on. I honestly think that this might be, in terms of total yardage for the entire game, somewhere under 300 for both teams combined. Easy, under 300. I like Minnesota to win, though, just because they do have the better running back. -3, because I think it's like a 4 to 7 point game. And finally, number 4 TCU going on the road to Baylor. They're only a 3.5 point favorite. Someone knows something I don't know. Baylor's been coming on late. However, they just got absolutely shellacked by Kansas State. So this is a sleepy noon kickoff for TCU, which is 11 o'clock their time in Waco. Right after a night game of the week where the crowd was into it, their fans were into it, so much on the line. TCU skating on thin ice. I mean, they have been. They've been winning. But it's either been their defense has had to hold things down in their second half while their offense catches up, or vice versa. Their offense has to hold things down in their second half until their defense catches up. I don't like what I saw from Baylor, But sleepy game. It's 3.5. I like it because I think TCU squeaks by 7 because Baylor just doesn't have enough in their passing game, in my personal opinion. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if this is an upset. And, lady, that would throw Michigan-Tennessee fans should be rejoicing at that news if this is an upset. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are my 5 picks just to run you back through it. Battle for LA, I like UCLA and the over of 75.5 to hit. Oregon and Utah, that over of 61.5 to hit, and I actually like Utah to go into Eugene and hand Oregon their second straight loss because I don't know that Bo Nix is all that healthy. I like Michigan and the Michigan to win the under to hit, which basically means Illinois is out of the Big Ten West, and Michigan doesn't get caught looking ahead. I like Minnesota to squeak by Iowa minus the 3, and that would basically mean, assuming Purdue wins against Northwestern on Saturday, would mean Purdue would be the Big Ten West champion and would face the winner of Ohio State, Michigan. And then I like TCU just to squeak by Baylor by 4 points, 4 to 7 points again, and it's a comeback win. Sleepy, noon, 11 local kick in Waco against a very well-coached team in Dave Aranda, the reigning Big 12 champs. Whoo, baby. It's going to be a good week if you're a college football fan. I want everyone...
Powered by Riverside.
Oh, that's not
FM.
what I want at all. I want everyone to wash your hands because y'all are filthy animals, and that's how germs get transmitted. We miss Fancy Trash Can. We hope you listen to this podcast. Go follow us on Instagram at 4th and 1 Podcast. Thank you, everyone, so much for tuning in. We will be back next week to preview rivalry week and the biggest game, Michigan, Ohio State. God bless. Peace out.